Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Right here, right now, we are going to reveal a lot about you, your career. First out of the gate, here is one thing that you can do to improve your job situation, possibly get promoted, and it's something that people usually overlook. And it's the number one skill that employers are looking for. And this is fresh research out of Harvard. Literally just came out. What is the number one thing you can do to better yourself within your work environment? The answer is collaboration. Working together with people, connecting with people, problem solving, all of that. We're going to talk about that and more with this guy who knows all about that.
Woo!
He's back
Well, maybe some about it anyway.
Let me do the intro, make us sound good.
You bet. You bet.
He is somebody that coaches all different types of people, from executives to CEOs to people that just want to do better at their job. Coaching for Relevance.com is his company, and Randy Swaim is back with us on the program. Randy, welcome. How are you?
It's great, man. Good to see you again. It's always a pleasure to be here. So good to see you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to collaborate with you on these shows.
Same here.
And I know back in the day we've talked about collaboration and how important it is, but yeah, now we have a professor at Harvard studied this whole thing, just came out, and I know you're in line with all of this as well.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's a key aspect of leadership. And some of the stuff that you were kind of mentioning there, which I'll let you kind of share what you want, but it's a good intro into that picture, because we'll take it to certain aspects of leadership. And one of the things we'll take it to is the concept of leading up as well. And so, yeah, we can do that. I'll let you kind of introduce or say what you want, and we'll kind of go into that.
And I'd love to learn more about the leading up concept. In this study that just came out, there are 3 things that you can do to get better at collaborating, according to this researcher. Ask for help. There's never anything wrong, but a lot of us are afraid to do that because we think it'll minimize our role, make us seem weak. Completely the opposite. Acknowledge people's efforts and show appreciation. We've talked about that before, how it's not done a lot or enough, especially coming from the upper level down. And be an inclusive leader. Somebody who's younger, older, or with a different background may have a different way of solving problems. You need to look at that and adopt that in terms of the collaboration. But again, number one skill that employers are looking for that people lack is collaboration skills.
And part of it, I think, in our society generally, is not everybody, but you know, we tend to sort of live in a little bit of a narcissistic society where you have a lot of people that just say, I just want to tell you this, and I just want you to believe it because I said it. And you know what? That's not where all this goes. And when you were talking about the making people appreciate their job and their role and everything, you know, at the place that I work with over at the airport, even when I see janitorial people, you know, I'll sit there and say, hey, listen, if you haven't heard it yet today, appreciate all you do, as I walk by. And that's it. It's nothing big. It's nothing huge.
Yeah.
But you just never know. You know, sometimes that can be a real simple thing. But this aspect of collaboration is huge. It's one thing I know we've talked a lot about as a leader, trying to collaborate with your team and help them be synergistically together and all of that. But interestingly enough, what if your boss, not the team's boss, because you're that, your boss is doing things or employing things, you know, without really, you know, doing anything vindictive or anything like that, but is doing it in a way that's causing your team to start disbelieving in itself and stuff. What are you going to do? And there's this concept of leading up, and I love I shared a picture of how I've had to do this one time in my career, back when I became a site manager at Griffiths Air Force Base. And I think the last time I shared it was like about almost a year ago. So, you know, the people that are listening may not have heard it, but it's an aspect of how are you going to approach your boss when you see that there's something that can be tweaked simply without a whole lot of effort in terms of how your team is experiencing what they're trying to do in a way that makes them much more successful, much more believing that they're being interacted with collaboration. And that is huge.
So now we have the upper level management who you report to, and you have your team that reports to you. If I'm hearing this right, your team, is getting messages from the upper management that might not really be relevant, if you will.
And it may be just in their experience. It
Okay.
may not be anything that they're hearing. I mean, it may be something like that, but it may be just in their experience. They're having a sense that the senior management doesn't give a flying rip about us or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And that may not be true, but as the leader of that team, how are you going to interact and communicate in such a way that your organization can perhaps tweak that in a way where people are much more successful? I think I shared this a very quick story back. The site that I was at in a Department of Defense training contractor flying Learjets, kind of thing, at Griffiths Air Force Base, the particular site we had there. There was the manager that was there at the time was, I don't want to be overly negative of him, but he just didn't understand a lot of leadership. And so there were just big time problems. And in fact, so much so that the headquarters director of the Air Force program worldwide called me at my home one day. And he said, listen, I know you don't have any access to grind, Randy. I know you're not going to badmouth anybody. And I didn't. I said, he said, could you just share with me what your experience is going on up there? Because you could tell that it was just not going well. And after a little bit of a time of just sharing kind of why the people are feeling that and everything, he asked me, he said, well, what would you do? And if there's anybody that's listening to the show here that listened to me about 9 months ago, you probably heard this story before, but it's a good insight for kind of what you're talking about with when you need to do that. And one of the things that I told them is I said, he looked at me, well, didn't look at me, we were on the phone, but he said, so what would you do, Randy? What do you think is needed down there? And here's one of the things that I said. Yeah, I said the first thing that's truly needed here is all these team members here need to realize that the office space and the operations area of our detachment there is their family living room. It's our living room. And they need to know that as long as there's no clients there, there's no military personnel there or anything like that, that they can say anything they want to say at any time about the company, about the maintenance, about the scheduling, about whatever, about maybe some of the clients, who knows, kind of thing. And they'll never hear about it again. And this guy didn't look at me. He listened to me on the phone. He said, well, boy, that's different. And I said, trust me, I know it is. I know it is. And by the way, I didn't badmouth the manager. I just talked about the situation as it was. And he said, well, why do you say that? Because that is different. I said, I know it is. He said, why is that? Why do you say that? And I said, well, first and foremost, if I was going to be leading this group, I need to know what they're honestly feeling and experiencing with the bark on. Doesn't mean I can always do something about it, but I have to be willing to hear it and to know it. And he said, well, boy, that's different. He said, I can see that. And I said, yeah. And I said, and the other thing was, I said, when they're flying, if they need to vent, I want them venting in our office space and not at 35,000 feet where safety is paramount, kind of thing. He said, well, that makes sense. I said, yeah, kind of thing. And he was dead quiet on the phone for about 20 seconds. And then he said, can I ask you something, Randy? I said, sure. He said, would you go down there and do that? And I went, are you asking me what I think you're asking me? He said, yes, I am. I said, have you talked to him yet? And he said, no. He said, I'm going to call him next. He said, I said, well, I'll tell you what, you go have whatever conversations you need to have, kind of thing. And then if you want to, you can call me back. And if you choose to put me down there, that's how I would do it. And it made a big difference in just a couple of months. In fact, they wrote me up for taking a problem site and turning it into the showcase of the company in minimum time, quote unquote. And so, but it's that kind of thing. What I did is I led up. I didn't attack anybody. I didn't badmouth him. I just said, here's the experience people are feeling. Here's kind of what's getting in the way there. And I said, if that gets fixed, then this problem can get fixed. And I didn't negotiate with him. I didn't tell him what he needs to do or anything like that in leading up, because he's the boss kind of thing. But what I did is I shared some of that insight with him, and he almost immediately saw the solution for him in what he wanted and let him step forward to it. But that's the thing when you're talking about this collaboration thing, to what extent does your team feel that you're standing up for them as their leader? Now, if you got somebody, and really, if you think about leading up, it's doing that same stuff we've been talking about for a number of weeks of that leadership coming from inside and not just dictating and controlling, but really helping people maximize what they're doing and where they're going kind of thing. But it's doing that up the chain as well, kind of thing. And so it's just some interesting points on that when you're talking about this collaboration. Sometimes that can be bigger and more inclusive than most people realize. But it's a good point that you talked about, that because you know what, that's what you want. You know what, if I'm the leader, if I'm a director of a facility and somebody is experiencing a challenge, to what extent am I willing to listen to it? Does it mean we can fix it? No. It might mean that I've just got to come along and encourage them in a way where they think that I believe in them. It may be that.
Yeah.
Or they may kind of present something that I didn't see, that it's like, oh yeah, you know what? Let's do that. Let's fix that, kind of thing. And so when you're talking about that aspect of leading up, and even if you're an executive level person, to what extent are you really having conversations that people in your organization, in your team, feel like there's a collaboration point here? Yeah, there's some things that maybe we're not doing right, but we can probably fix that. But if the teams feel like, hey, you know what? Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's get better at this. And they can initiate moving forward to get better at that. A lot of positive things can happen, but it's very aligned with exactly what you're talking about.
And the very minimum is showing that you care. Like you just said, Randy, might not be able to fix the problem. Maybe as a leader, you're not getting it. That can all happen. But if you show the empathy and that you care, and the other side is what we talked about, the team has a certain feeling. Perception is reality. They could be completely off. They might not even understand what upper management is trying to do. If they believe things aren't right or they're being treated a certain way, that's their belief.
Yeah. And that's where as a leader, you got to understand and be able to connect with them. And also in terms of leading up, what if your boss realizes your team's just screwing up? They just can't get there. How are you going to communicate with them? It doesn't mean you make excuses for it. Doesn't mean you cast blame games here or there. It might mean that you get an insight in your leadership role of something you need to do different. Maybe you have a good conversation as a team with your boss and you find some insights that go, boy, yeah, you know what? I think that will be good for this situation and take it to a better level. And you go down and have that conversation with your team and you help them experience that one thing differently. That's the key of all of this. So when you mentioned that, that is so in line with this whole concept that I was going to kind of bring totally today. And just before we started the show, you and I kind of mentioned, and I said this, that there was a phrase that I posted. I just shared it, that I saw posted on social media, and I shared it this week. And it was this aspect that if you're promoting the wrong people, the right people leave. And you know what? If you have people, one of the things that might be interesting is to what extent or in what way is your organization identifying who they want to be promoted? Or let's face it, at what point do you want to promote somebody because they're very effective at what they're doing, but they need to get better at this one thing? How are you going to coach and mentor them to be able to really improve that one aspect? Because guess what? I don't care where all of us are at any point in our career. I love it in martial arts. They said, as soon as you think you've arrived, it's solid proof that you haven't. And you know what? When I get if I were to get an executive position next week, does that mean that I'm where I want to be? No. There's something that I need to look at, that I need to keep improving myself. And from my standpoint, I use the phrase, it's running through the finish line. When I if I retire, if one of these days, if I take my last breath, I'm still going to be advancing. I'm still going to be going forward. And the same thing in this kind of an environment when you're talking about true leadership. And if you're modeling that and your team sees that and experiences that, guess what? They start to adopt that as their mindset, their strategy, their vision. And guess what? When they are doing that, even when you're not there, they become better. And you know what? They'll become better for your company to promote them down the road. And so all of this, when you're talking about this collaboration aspect and the report and the posting that you saw there, guess what? All of that relates to this, but it's a key aspect of leadership that is not just academic, and it's not just go do this and tell these people to do that and all that. It's way deeper than that.
We actually have instant feedback based on what we're talking about today, Randy.
Cool.
Yeah. And by the way, you can reach us instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. Kelly checks in from Newark, New Jersey. She says, I can't believe you're talking about this today. My coworker was recently promoted over me, even though I'm much more qualified. This coworker is very social and very verbal, and I think that's why they picked her over me. I'm not really sure what to do and if I should stay at this job because I'm frustrated. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, there's a whole lot more that I'd have to kind of learn about the situation, obviously. But if you, a couple of the questions that just come to mind right this second, because she said, and I think you said her name was Kelly,
right?
Kind of thing. She was aware that the other person was more communicative than she was, and I would say, so at what point do you need to increase that, enhance that in what you're doing? Also, when she communicates, what do the people that hear her receive? What do they experience? And how do you improve that in the way you communicate with people? That's just two of the little things like that. I mean, I will say this, that Kelly, if you're listening, I will tell you that the fact that you are aware of that, you have my compliments. And I mean this. I mean this very sincerely. You have my compliments for your vision on that. But if I was coaching somebody like that, that's one of the first couple of things I would do is I would ask them some questions that get them thinking about, when you hear that other person was more communicative than I was or whatever, to what extent? How did they do that? And in the results of the people they were working with or you were working with or whatever, is there a difference in those two? And if so, maybe you're achieving the same results, but the team of somebody that communicates really well is a lot more in the game than the other team is, possibly.
Again, there's a lot, and what you said before, Randy, rings true because we don't know all the details.
There you go.
We could assume, doesn't mean this is true.
Yeah.
This coworker that got promoted is always in the face of the supervisor.
Possibly.
Could be a brown noser. Haven't heard that in a long time, but one of those could be.
Yeah.
Could be that person that's just always, vocal, always there, making noise, good or bad. It might not even have even close to the skills and credentials that Kelly has. Obviously, she's frustrated.
Yeah.
The coworkers on their radar. So it's a challenge, especially if Kelly is somebody that is I call them sometimes worker bees. You're there,
Yeah.
you're churning it out. You're doing a great job. You're just not taking that time to take, the coffee break, to hang out with people, to, touch
Yeah.
base, if you will.
And what's interesting on that too, with what she's talking about, that's a key point, because guess what? If you're the worker bees, like you said, to what point is the communication not happening? It doesn't mean that you got to communicate the same level and exactly the same way as that other person did. But if you're not having that communication, how did the bosses who chose her, how did they know?
Mm.
You may have had skills that were just really great, aligned or even excelling from hers, but they
True.
didn't know it. So there's a lot of that involved in that.
And this coworker could have been that person who says, if there's any opportunity, I would love that opportunity to move forward and move up here in the company. I love working with you guys. Where Kelly could be thinking it, didn't verbalize it, and they may think, well, you know what? She hasn't said anything. Maybe she does. Maybe she's happy doing what she's doing. So we'll just keep her doing what she's doing.
And you know what? It could be that exactly what you just said. Yeah, exactly right. It could be that the management thought, you know what? She's not saying much. I guess she's happy where she is. Okay, we'll just let her be there because they're wanting her to be where she's happy,
And
because
I
they
don't
didn't
feel like
know.
we
Yeah,
don't call Kelly, and just like you said before,
that's right. That's right.
Much respect for her realizing that maybe she's not as vocal as this coworker.
Mhm.
Well, I guess it comes down to it can't hurt to ask. It can't hurt
And
to ask or throw it out there.
and you know what? That's cool. And it's not about you going and selling yourself when you're talking to them, but if you go up to your boss or your leadership
Supervisors, maybe.
team above you, and you go, you know what? Here's why you want me, stuff. Guess what? They're going to go, kind of thing. But if you bring the conversations about the stuff that you're doing, maybe you bring up something that you saw in one of your team members that you said, you know what? This was amazing what they did on this and how they responded. I just want to share it with you so people know. It may be something that simple, but you know what? You got to have that connection and that synergy from the CEO all the way down. And it doesn't mean just dictatorial things, but it means collaborative things. And
Yes, I
and that
love what you
synergy.
said. Love what you said there, because just saying, if Kelly were to bring out the points of somebody else, she's just appearing to be a team player. And you're kind of seeding your future by doing that, by
Yeah.
saying, Jennifer, I just want you guys to know she nailed it. Like I'm even surprised that she got that. So
Yeah. And and what's amazing about that too is she is communicating to the higher ups that she was aware of that, she saw it, and she
right.
knows it without bragging.
And you know what we're afraid of? We're afraid of sometimes making others look better than ourselves.
Mm-hmm. But you
At
know
the,
what? True leaders, it sounds kind of crazy, but true leaders do just that in some respects. Doesn't mean it's better than ourselves, but we're highlighting what
highlighting.
others do.
Yeah. Yeah. Acknowledging. That's all it is. And wait,
There you go.
hang on a second. Let me look back here. Number two from the Harvard professor on the
Cool.
collaboration. Number two is acknowledge people's efforts and show appreciation.
There you go.
Like there it is right there, based on, and it says, and I didn't even know it said this, and we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Read the fine point. Here it is. Let go of the me first mentality and focus on the team. A lot of us fail to appreciate how much support we get from our coworkers.
Bingo. And you know what? When you go out there, if you think about it, you can demonstrate leadership by lauding somebody that reports to you.
Right. Right. They make you look better if you present it in a certain way.
There you go. And so all of that is wrapped up in this whole aspect of, and like I said, even with this aspect of leading up and how you do that and everything, this is huge. And,
Yeah.
but you know what? It's something that true leaders have to understand, because guess what? That's where miraculous results happen.
Yeah.
When people just totally believe in themselves. And I love the phrase with martial arts that I think I shared weeks and weeks ago, but it says, you know what, the true sensei, the true leader, the true sensei walks into the dojo, and after an hour they leave and everybody's better, but they think they did it themselves. And you know what? There's a lot of truth to that when you're talking about exactly what we're relating to here today.
That's a true leader.
Yeah, it is.
Somebody who's figured it out and has it, because just by them showing up and whatever they're doing, however they're doing it, you feel that you're empowered just by that situation. Wow.
And you know what? When the leader just looks at you and smiles and just nods their head and winks at you, and that's all they did.
Yep.
I think I shared this one time. My team was working on a kind of a little insight, if you will, and one of the co-pilots sat down with a pad and a pen, but then he realized I was in the room, and he stopped and he went, "What?" And he looked at me because he was going to say, "I guess I better make sure the boss thinks this is okay." And all I did is I looked at him and I nodded my head and I winked. I just went. And he just smiled and sat down and started making some notes. But that's exactly a picture of what you're talking about. That's what true leaders do. And that's where miraculous and amazing results happen from teams, when they have that aspect of belief, synergy, and vision and belief, and the growth process as well.
Just what you did. And it was all body language and shaking your head and just a little, just an acknowledgement, what that could do for somebody's self-esteem.
Oh, yeah.
Thinking that, well, they really don't appreciate me. You didn't even say a word. It was it's amazing. Yeah.
I didn't even open my eyes, open my mouth. I mean, and he actually went on to be, flying some big airplanes, kind of thing. And, but yeah, he, like I say, that's the big, deeper picture of everything that you saw in that report. When you look at this aspect of collaboration and how that really works and how leaders truly do it, that is huge.
This study that's out talks about what you should do in terms of collaboration to move yourself up. You talk about how you should do it. So that's fantastic. Randy, we're out of time.
So I'll tell you what, it's an honor as always, brother. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, same. Great talk today, and a lot of good insight. And I hope we helped out Kelly and everybody else. Coachingforrelevance.com is your website. And as always, thank you. And we'll catch up next time.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.